Welcome to Resilience and Resolve with Lance Drury.
Hello and welcome to Resilience and Resolve with Lance Drury, where we break down the complexities of the tax world, making it easier for you to navigate through the numbers and paperwork. I am your host, Kevin Rosenquist, and in today's episode, we're going to talk about breaking free from IRS penalties and understanding penalty abatement. Lance, so great to see you again. Thanks for being here.
I'm happy to be here, Kevin. Always good to see you.
To define something for me, what is IRS penalty abatement?
Well, IRS penalty abatement is, failure to pay penalties can be abated. The IRS is going to tack on a failure to pay penalty. They consider that what they're doing is giving you a loan, so there's penalties and interest. You can't get the interest abated, it's statutory, but you can get the penalties lifted in certain instances. There's two main types. One is first-time penalty abatement. The other is penalty abatement for reasonable cause. So first-time penalty abatement, you can only get it once. It's regulated to 1 year only. And so what happens is if you had a good track record with the IRS prior to the year that you're asking for penalty abatement, you have to be 100% compliant for the 3 years prior to the year that you're requesting penalty abatement. So let's say you have liability for 2021, there's penalties of $5,000. You can get those abated if you paid on time in 2018, 2019, and 2020. Now,
Okay.
the other type of penalty abatement is penalty abatement for reasonable cause. It's not limited to 1 year, but you have to have a good reason to have those penalties abated. The most common one is, death or illness. If you were tied up but you've got to have reasonable cause as to why you did not pay your income taxes. And just because you didn't have the money to get the returns prepared or that's not going to get those penalties abated. But the main one is, poor health, things of that nature. Then you can get the penalties abated for reasonable cause. But it's not like it's 50% of the time. I mean, it's hard to get penalties abated for reasonable cause. The good news, though, is that if you do have a good reason, you can get all the penalties for failure to pay abated, and that can be significant.
Okay, yeah. So just falling on hard times, that's not enough to get it abated.
No.
Okay. And can you explain the IRS's first-time penalty abatement program and how taxpayers can qualify?
Well, like I said earlier, first-time penalty abatement is you have to be 100% compliant for the 3 years prior to the year for which you're requesting penalty abatement.
Okay.
Yeah. So I gave you the example earlier about if you got liability in 2021, you want to get the penalties kicked, you have to file on time and pay on time for 2018, 2019, and 2020. If you're a day late, you're not going to get it.
So are there any other requirements, or as long as it's your first time and you paid like those 3 previous years?
That's the only requirement, but you can
okay.
only get it once. You can't do 2 different periods and say, well, I was compliant, for 3 years prior to the other year that you're seeking. It only works for one time.
Okay. And do most people get it when they request that, or is there still
no? There's a lot of people. There's a lot of people that have a long history of non-compliance.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't filed the returns in years, so you're not going to get it for that. Or they have a history of paying late, or they have a history of filing on time but not paying on time. So even if you ask for an extension, the extension only goes as to the filing. Penalties and interest continue to accrue from April. So you've got to file, but if you do file an extension, you're considered timely if you do pay by the October 15th date. But you can only do this once, and you've got to be 100% clean for the 3 years prior to the year in which you're requesting first-time penalty abatement.
And then for the reasonable cause one, we talked about that it's not easy to get and you can't just have fallen on hard times. You used the example of a death in the family or a long-term illness or something like that. Are there other areas or other causes that you've seen that tend to work in that situation?
I believe you can also get it if you got bad advice from an IRS employee or you got bad advice from an accountant, but you better have that all documented, so there's those types of things as well. I'm sure there's other areas where you can get it from, but the primary one that I've seen by far is death or illness. Even in the family, people get hospitalized. They have problems like we just had one with loss of memory. And so we got some penalties abated in U.S. tax court, but not as many as we wanted. But the problem was with the client. We told her to get documentation from her doctor. If she had done that, we probably would have gotten much more penalties abated than just the 25%. We probably would have gotten 50% or more abated, if not the whole thing. But she refused to get documentation from her doctor stating that she's got these memory problems.
Okay. Interesting. I wonder why she didn't want to do that.
Well, you have to understand sometimes we have clients and they don't understand that there's a procedure. They think we wave a magic wand and everything automatically goes away, but there's a process. We can't get anybody in agreement until the last 6 years' tax returns are prepared and filed. And we have a guy now, and for whatever reason, he doesn't want to file his returns, and he's upset that we can't get him an agreement. But, you got to play the game according to the rules, and if you're not willing to do that, you're not going to get very far in getting your tax problems resolved.
Right. Can you explain how the process works of penalty abatement, how long it typically takes to receive a decision, and sort of just what the process is?
Okay, well, it's really different for both of those types. So let me start with the first time penalty abatement. You can just call up the IRS and request it. So you can get, penalty abatement in a matter of hours or minutes So, but the problem is we have to wait till we can get into the IRS systems to see about the history of that client's particular case with the IRS. And then we can tell when we get that paperwork and we prepare what's called a tax account analysis, and we can find out whether or not they qualify. And the power of attorney takes about a month to process. Now, in the case of penalty abatement for reasonable cause, that's Form 843. You have to fill that out. You have to send it in. Hopefully, you'll get a decision in 6 months, but we're finding not just with penalty abatement for reasonable cause, but returns to be processed, it's taken much longer than before, and sometimes we have to get the taxpayer advocate involved. But the problem with the taxpayer advocate is they only call you like once every 45 days. And if you're on the phone or tied up with a client, guess what? You're not going to hear from them for another 45 days, even if you return their phone call. So it can be an arduous process, even with the taxpayer advocate, because they just don't have enough people helping. And sometimes we don't even hear back from them. We have to resubmit what's called the 911. That's asking for assistance from the taxpayer advocate because for whatever reason, it falls through the cracks.
What an insane thing. It's such a crazy thing to think about. Okay, well, we're going to call you. And if you don't answer, well, we're not going to call you again for 45 days. Even if you call us back, we're not going to call you again for 45 days.
But I guess the problem is they just don't have enough people.
Right.
Here's the crazy thing. People want to cut back on the IRS. Well, for every dollar they cut back, they lose $5 in revenue. And the other thing is people want to cut back because they don't want the IRS on them, which I get, because the more people they have, the more levies that would be out there. They'd be getting more people's monies and assets. But then the same people that don't like that, when they do get a problem, they complain about how long it takes, and they don't understand, well, you didn't want them funded, so, their service is going to suck. And that's exactly what happens is they don't have enough people, and they still don't. And I don't see that they will anytime in the near future.
That's such the human way, right? It's how people are, right? We don't want something, but then when we don't want to fund something, but then when we need it, we're complaining about the fact that we can't get the service we need.
Well, that's like when people talk about lawyers. They think they're the biggest SOBs in the world until they hire you, and then they want you to be the biggest. Yeah, when they need you, you're not a big enough one.
Right. Yep. All of a sudden, yep, backtracking. So you mentioned documentation needed for the reasonable cause. What type of documentation or evidence does the IRS require, or what will help your case the most?
Well, we try to get as much physical documentation as we can, hospital records, letters from a doctor, all things of that nature. If they're in the hospital, get all of that information, any medications that they're on, getting all that information. But the biggest one would be one from a doctor who can attest to their condition and the consequences of having such condition and how that impairs their ability to pay their taxes in a timely fashion.
Okay. All right. That makes sense.
So lots of medical documentation.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And if you get denied a penalty abatement request, do you have options to appeal or
You do have the right to appeal. Yes.
But then you got to wait that whole process over.
Oh yeah, you get like 30 days to file an appeal. There's not much involved to the filing of the appeal, but then you sit around and wait for somebody from the IRS to contact you, and that can take months and months and months. I have never seen the IRS as bad as they are now. An amended return. If you amend your tax return, I got a guy now that wants to do that. And I said, well, you're going to have to hire us to run interference because it takes a year or two for those amended returns to process. They are one of their lowest priority items. And then if you haven't filed in a long time, those old tax returns back from the 2010s, they're going to be low priority. So, it's the more current ones get processed quicker. But, if you haven't filed in 10 years and you file from 2000, you wouldn't want to file 2015 because the IRS only requires the last 6 years. But you would want to file if the IRS has filed a return for you because their numbers are bogus. They don't give you all the credits and deductions you're entitled to when you file. And if you're self-employed, guess what? They keep track of your revenue, but they don't keep track of your business expenses. Mm-hmm. And so their numbers are bogus, but they're gospel until you file. So we've seen self-employed people, IRS files a return. They over $100,000 for 1 year. And then we prepare and file the returns for them, and it's under $10,000.
Yeah.
And that's because the business expenses are not calculated when the IRS files the return.
Wow. Yeah, and you got to believe that like these people are going to get so burned out and fed up that you're going to probably have people leaving, and then it's going to get even worse.
You mean with the IRS?
The IRS, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And I think that over the next 5 years, I know they're cutting back now, but just the people that would retire in the next 5 years would account for a substantial cutback on the staffing at the IRS. Mm-hmm. So, because they're already doing it now. I mean, Trump's not waiting, and but that's the way it is. You gotta do with what you got, and so it's the worst possible time in my career dealing with these problems. I've done it for 20 years now. I've never seen the IRS this bad. Mm-hmm. They are just atrocious, and it's so frustrating to my clients, and they don't understand all the time that we don't control the inner workings of the IRS.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they feel like you should have some sort of inside track or something, huh?
Right. And now we do, because we have special software, we can get into the IRS systems and get a lot more information than they would ever tell us over the telephone. And we also can get through to the automated collection system in 3 minutes. And the average Joe calls up, he may be waiting for an hour or 2 hours, and then they may disconnect him. And that's what we had to do in the old days until they came up with this special software. And of course, it costs a pretty penny, but it's well worth it when you can get through in a matter of minutes rather than waiting on the phone for an hour or two. And then if they disconnect you, it's really frustrating.
Oh, yeah.
And I know people that come to me and hire my firm just because they've tried and tried and tried to get through. They get disconnected and they're tired of spending 6, 8, 10 hours trying to talk to the IRS.
Frustrating for sure.
Yes.
How often would you say, rough estimate percentage-wise, do people get approved for the penalty abatement through the reasonable cause?
Well, that's a good question. I don't think it's 50% of the time, maybe 30% of the time, 25% of the time.
Yeah, so it's difficult.
It's difficult. It's not the easiest thing in the world. I know some practitioners, when they market their services, try to act like, it's a done deal. But I think in reality, it's 25 to 30% is probably about the average.
And how are you able to help, for anyone listening who might be doing this on their own, how are you able to help increase their chances or expedite the process?
Well, the one thing that people don't do when they try to handle it on their own is, again, they don't get the documentation.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can advise them, and they don't know what they need. So the way that we can help these people is through telling them exactly what it is that we're going to need in order to be successful. It's like when people call me for an audit, it's just not penalty abatement. And we tell them, okay, if you don't have the documentation, you're not going to be successful in this audit. But they still want to hire us because they don't want to talk directly to the IRS, because some of those audits go criminal just because of what the client tells them during the course of the audit. So you really should not be talking you shouldn't be talking directly to the IRS, period.
Wow, it goes criminal. Yeah, because they're not handling things right. They're talking too much.
Yes, exactly.
Wow.
And a lot of people, it's just human nature. It's the same thing with people that talk to the cops. They get a confession. Well, ball game's over, because it's just human nature to want to talk, and they volunteer too much information. So that's why when we get involved in the case, the client never comes close to talking to the IRS.
I remember you saying in a previous episode that sometimes the IRS agents will skirt the law and still try to talk to the client, even though they're not supposed to do that.
Yeah, there are some bad actors out there, and they cannot do that. And I can tell you right now, the Missouri Department of Revenue bypasses the power of attorney all the time. They'll send the paperwork to the client, but they don't send a copy to us or anything.
Mm-hmm.
So half the time we have to get it from the client. Now, the IRS is statutorily required in certain instances to send some notices to the client. For example, the final notice of intent to levy, the CP 504, which is an intent to levy. It says that, but they can't levy from that letter. They're just trying to scare the taxpayer, and they do a good job of it. But some of them, they're required, even though they're sending them to us, to also send them to the taxpayer.
Okay. Well, as always, the lesson is don't try to do it yourself. Call Lance.
Yeah. I mean, I tell people, if you were, if you had heart surgery, if I had to do heart surgery, I wouldn't be doing a very good job. What you're trying to do when you deal with the IRS on your own is like me trying to do heart surgery. Mm-hmm. And if you had to have heart surgery, because we do not compete on cost, we compete on our service and the judgments we get from the IRS, the results that we get for our clients. Because 85 to 90% of our clients never pay back the full amount in taxes, because it's all based on their ability to pay. We go the extra mile for our people. And so, don't try to do this yourself.
Yeah, always a good piece of advice. Well, thank you for tuning into Resilience and Resolve with Lance Drury. To connect with Lance, visit lancedrurylaw.com. And please like our videos, subscribe. We love having you be part of our community. We got lots more great tax episodes for you. Lance, great to see you as always. Thanks so much for being here.
Great to see you, Kevin. I look forward to it every time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.